I loved old books. Their musty smell, the feel of brittle pages, the stories whispered from another time. My grandmother's attic was a treasure trove.
Dusty sunlight filtered through a small window, illuminating shelves stacked high with forgotten tales. Lila spent hours there, each visit a journey into the past.
Today, something called to me from the darkest corner. A trunk, tucked beneath a moth-eaten tapestry, beckoned. I knelt, my fingers tracing the intricate carvings on its surface. Anticipation thrummed through my veins. This, I sensed, was no ordinary find.
With a groan, the trunk creaked open, revealing its contents. Stacks of yellowed letters, faded photographs, and nestled amongst them, a leather-bound journal. Its cover was smooth, almost warm to the touch. A single word, embossed in faded gold, sent shivers down Lila's spine. Shadows.
The journal felt heavy in my hands, a tangible link to the past. Its worn leather cover, cracked and aged, hinted at the many hands that had held it before me. Curiosity warred with trepidation as I opened its cover. What secrets lay within these pages? What stories were waiting to be uncovered? The first pages were filled with elegant script, the ink faded but still legible. Each word seemed to whisper tales of a bygone era, drawing me deeper into its narrative.
The writer identified himself as Elias, an artist living in the same house a century earlier. His name, written with such care, felt like an introduction to a long-lost friend. His words painted vivid pictures of his life, his passion for capturing the world on canvas. Each stroke of his pen mirrored the strokes of his brush, bringing his world to life. But a darkness bled through his elegant prose. There was a sense of foreboding, a shadow lurking behind his words.
Elias, it seemed, harbored an obsession, the shadows that danced at the edges of his vision. They were always there, just out of reach, taunting him. He wrote of their whispers, faint at first, then growing stronger. The shadows seemed to speak to him, their voices growing louder with each passing day. The shadows, he believed, held secrets, a hidden world visible only to him. He was convinced that they were trying to tell him something important.
His writing grew more frantic, the script almost illegible. The once elegant handwriting became a chaotic scrawl, reflecting his growing desperation. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through the years, reaching out from the pages to grip me. It was as if the very essence of his terror had been preserved in the ink, gripping Lila in its icy embrace. The fear was palpable, a chilling reminder of the shadows that haunted Elias and now seemed to reach out to us. Days turned into weeks as Lila delved deeper into Elias's world. The journal became her sole focus, each stolen moment spent in the attic. Elias's obsession with shadows consumed him.
He wrote of spending hours in the dimly lit corners of the house trying to capture their essence on canvas. He described the whispers as a language he couldn't quite grasp, yet felt compelled to understand. The shadows, he believed, held the key to unlocking the true nature of reality.
Lila read on, a growing sense of dread twisting in her stomach. Elias's writing became increasingly erratic. His words were filled with paranoia and terror. The shadows, once objects of fascination, had become sinister entities. They taunted him, he wrote, their whispers promising power and knowledge, but at a terrible cost. The boundary between the journal and Lila's reality began to blur. She found herself studying shadows, noticing how they lengthened and deepened as dusk approached. The rustle of leaves outside her window sounded like whispers, sending chills down her spine. She imagined Elias, driven to madness by the entities he'd invited into his life.
Had he discovered the truth behind their whispers? Or had they consumed him entirely? The line between sanity and madness, once clear, now seemed terrifyingly thin.
One passage in particular sent a shiver down Lila's spine. Elias wrote of the shadows coalescing, forming shapes that defied logic and reason. They were no longer mere extensions of darkness, but sentient beings with malevolent intent. Lila slammed the journal shut, her heart pounding in her chest.
Fear warred with a morbid fascination. Elias's descent into madness both terrified and compelled me.
She searched for his paintings, desperate to see the horrors he had captured on canvas. In the attic's furthest corner, she found them, hidden behind a dusty sheet. The paintings were like windows into a nightmare. Twisted figures with glowing eyes stared back at her, their forms shifting and swirling in a maelstrom of darkness. One painting, in particular, sent a jolt of pure terror through her.
It depicted a swirling vortex of shadows, and at its center, a vaguely human shape reaching out with clawed hands.
Beneath it, Elias had scrawled a chilling message. The canvas, gateway, they beckon me. Lila stumbled back, dropping the painting to the floor with a clatter.
Sleep offered little escape. Nightmares plagued me, filled with whispering shadows and the chilling images from Elias's paintings. Every corner of my vision seemed to hold a flicker of movement, a suggestion of something sinister lurking just beyond sight.
She tried to distance herself from the journal to forget the horrors it contained, but it held her captive, a morbid fascination she couldn't shake. The line between reality and the world Elias described had become dangerously thin.
The whispers seemed closer now, no longer confined to the attic. They followed me home, weaving themselves into the fabric of my everyday life. I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, my heart pounding at every creak and groan of the old house.
The shadows seemed to lengthen with each passing day. Even in the bright light of midday, Lila couldn't shake the feeling of unseen eyes watching her every move. The whispers grew stronger, weaving their way into her thoughts.
I tried to rationalize my growing fear. It was just an old journal, I told myself, a product of a tormented mind. But deep down, a primal terror whispered a different truth. The shadows were real, and they were closing in.
One evening, as Lila sat by the window, she noticed something strange. Her shadow, cast by the setting sun, seemed to writhe and contort, taking on a life of its own. Panic surged through her. This was no trick of the light, no figment of her imagination. The shadows were no longer content to observe.
Lila whirled around, her heart pounding in her chest. For a fleeting moment, she saw it, a figure silhouetted in the doorway, its form tall and gaunt, almost skeletal in its appearance. The dim light from the hallway cast eerie shadows, making the figure seem even more menacing. Its edges blurring and shifting like smoke, the figure seemed to waver between reality and nightmare. Then, just as quickly as it appeared, it was gone, leaving behind only a lingering sense of dread and the echo of a whisper that seemed to hang in the air. S1. Media. Close-up of journal on dusty table with soft whisper sound effect. Eerie whispering in dark room with journal. As I reached for the journal, I heard it. A soft whisper, barely audible, yet filled with a chilling malice. The sound was almost like a hiss, a sinister promise of something lurking just out of sight. It seemed to slither from the shadows themselves, coiling around me like a serpent, tightening its grip with every passing second. S3. Media. Shadow creeping along wall, whispering voice effect in dark attic. Driven by a mixture of terror and morbid curiosity, Lila returned to the attic, her steps hesitant but determined. The air felt thick and heavy, charged with a palpable sense of dread. Each step she took seemed to echo loudly, amplifying the silence that surrounded her. The shadows in the room seemed to pulsate, their edges blurring and shifting as if alive. They danced on the walls, creating grotesque shapes that seemed to reach out towards her, as if trying to pull her into their dark embrace. Lila could feel her heart racing, the fear almost paralyzing, but she knew she had to uncover the truth behind the figure in the shadows. Panic seized Lila. She stumbled back, her hand reaching for the doorknob. It wouldn't turn. The door, once easily opened, was now firmly locked. A cold, clammy terror gripped her. She was trapped.
The whispers grew louder, swirling around me, taunting me with their proximity. They spoke of Elias, of his descent into madness, of the terrible price he had paid for seeking their secrets.
Lila sank to the floor, her back against the wall, the journal clutched tightly in her hands. The shadows seemed to press in on her, suffocating her, their whispers a chorus of despair. She understood now. The shadows weren't just entities. They were a force, a malevolent presence that fed on fear, on desperation, and she had unwittingly invited them into her life. The temperature in the attic plummeted. The air grew heavy, thick with the stench of decay, and something ancient and evil. The whispers coalesced, forming a single voice, deep and resonant, that seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves.
You cannot escape us. You are ours now, just like Elias.
The shadows swirled faster, converging in the center of the room, taking on a more defined shape. Lila squeezed her eyes shut, her entire body trembling. This was it, she realized. The moment she had dreaded from the moment she first opened the journal.
When I opened my eyes, I was met with a sight that would forever be seared into my memory. Standing before me was a figure of pure darkness, its form vaguely humanoid, but twisted and distorted, its eyes burning with a malevolent light.
The creature lunged with a ferocity that seemed almost unstoppable. Lila screamed, her voice piercing the thick, oppressive silence of the attic, only to be swallowed by the darkness that surrounded her. She threw her arms up to shield herself, bracing for the inevitable impact that she was certain would come. But the blow never came. She waited, heart pounding, for the pain that never arrived. The creature froze mid-stride, its glowing eyes fixed on something behind her, as if it had seen a ghost.
I dared to turn my head, my breath caught in my throat. Standing in the doorway, bathed in a beam of moonlight that seemed almost too perfect, was the ghostly figure of a man. He was tall and gaunt, his face obscured by shadow, but his eyes burned with a fierce, otherworldly light that seemed to pierce through the darkness.
The creature recoiled, its form flickering as if buffeted by an unseen force, unable to withstand the presence of the ghostly figure. It let out a deafening shriek, a sound of pure rage and frustration, before dissolving into motes of darkness that scattered into the air. The shadows in the room retreated, the eerie whispers fading into an unnerving silence that seemed to echo in the emptiness. Lila was left trembling, bathed in the cold moonlight, alone with the ghost of Elias, her savior and her curse, the one who had both protected and haunted her.